One of the ways that we know the Bible is from God is that it is filled with prophecies that accurately foretell the future. The Bible contains hundreds of prophecies, a large fraction of which have already been fulfilled. Those that have been fulfilled have been 100% correct. God tells us in the Bible that these prophecies are there for a reason. God says through the prophet Isaiah, "I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please." God tells us in advance what He is going to do. This is one of the ways we know the Bible is from God. Wait a minute, you say. A lot of people predict the future. Yes, many people predict things, but their track record is horrible. The People's Almanac did a study of the predictions of 25 of the top psychics and 72 predictions that they made. 66 of the psychics' predictions were totally wrong. The 6 that were correct could be accounted for by chance or knowledge of the circumstances. Nostradamus is famed for his predictions, but they are so vague that it is hard to know what he is referring to. His followers have found multiple interpretations for the same prophecy. Nostradamus scholars have even admitted that many of his prophecies are flat out wrong. Let's just look at a few of the amazing prophecies in the Bible that have come true. God spoke through the prophet Ezekiel in 586 BC, saying that the city of Tyre would be destroyed. This is what the sovereign Lord says, "I am against you, O Tyre, and I will bring many nations against you, like the sea casting up its waves. They will destroy the walls of Tyre and pull down her towers. I will scrape away her rubble and make her a bare rock. From the north I am going to bring against Tyre Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. I will make you a bare rock, and you will become a place to spread fish nets. You will never be rebuilt, for I the Lord have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord." Sure enough, that is exactly what happened to Tyre. For 13 years, spanning 585 BC to 572 BC, Nebuchadnezzar besieged the mainland portion of Tyre and finally destroyed it. Alexander the Great besieged the island city of Tyre 350 years after Ezekiel's prophecy by building a causeway to the island from material scraped from the mainland into the sea and destroyed the island portion of the city. Further devastation was wreaked upon Tyre during the Muslim expansion. The Old Testament prophets, writing 500 to 800 years before Christ, made as many as 191 specific predictions about the Messiah that were completely fulfilled in the life of Jesus Christ. The prophets predicted that the Messiah would be born to a virgin, that he would be born in Bethlehem of the house of David, that he would be rejected by his own people, that he would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, that his clothing would be gambled for, that he would be assigned a grave among the rich, that he would be resurrected, that he would be pierced for our transgressions, and that he would be offered a drink mixed with gall, to name a few. Theologians count hundreds of other fulfilled Bible prophecies. The Lord's prophet Isaiah, living in the 7th century BC, identifies by name the Medo-Persian king who would conquer Babylon, where the Jews of Israel were living in exile, and who would later set the Jews free to return to Jerusalem to rebuild their city and their temple. The name of that Medo-Persian king was Cyrus. Isaiah prophesied his name 150 years before his army conquered Babylon. Many amazing prophecies are made about the nation of Israel in the Old Testament, but perhaps the most amazing predicts a second regathering of Israel as a nation. Israel returned to its land one time under Zerubbabel in 537 BC, after it was conquered by Nebuchadnezzar and exiled to Babylon. In 70 AD, the Roman general Titus crushed a Jewish revolt. More than 1 million lives were lost and the Jews were dispersed. But through the prophet Isaiah, God promised to regather Israel a second time. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the remnant that is left of his people. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Isaiah wrote these words 2,700 years ago, and current events seem to foreshadow fulfillment of this prophecy in the day of the Lord. In 1948, the United Nations voted to divide Palestine into a Jewish and Palestinian state. Against all odds, Israel once again became a nation. Some critics have suggested that the Old Testament scriptures were doctored to match New Testament events. because the accuracy of these prophecies is so dead on. The critics were silenced in a dramatic way. You see, in the late 1940s, Bedouins discovered a cache of scrolls in a cave at Qumran near the Dead Sea, and among these scrolls was a complete and intact copy of the book of Isaiah, one of the Bible books that contains many of the messianic prophecies. It lay untouched for over 2,000 years, with the exception of a few minor spelling variation and copyist errors. It is virtually identical once translated to the book of Isaiah in the modern Bible. This Dead Sea Caves version of the book of Isaiah has been dated to about 125 BC, 1,000 years earlier than any previous copy of the book of Isaiah, and over 100 years before Christ set foot on the planet. Yet it accurately foretells many of the events of the life of Christ. Only God can accurately foretell the future in advance. That the Bible is able to do so tells us that it is from God. As we have seen, science in the 21st century is pointing to a God of enormous creative power as demonstrated by his acts of creation. The Big Bang, the amazing complexity of life, and the organization of the universe tell us of a God who is capable of things which are beyond our understanding and capability. A God of this enormous power is capable of intervening in his creation and performing miracles. The New Testament includes eyewitness accounts of 35 instantaneous miracles performed by Christ, often before hundreds of watching people. The New Testament tells us that Jesus healed the sick and the blind, controlled natural forces, and was able to raise people from the dead. Jesus was able to turn water into wine and to feed thousands with a few loaves and fishes. As amazing as these miracles seem, these are trivial acts for the Son of God through whom all creation came into being. Before raising Lazarus, who had been dead for 4 days, Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die." Jesus prayed and commanded Lazarus to come out of his tomb. The New Testament records the following account. So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Jesus changed many hearts and minds that day. The Apostle John tells us, "Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him." Jesus did his miracles for a reason. He wanted us to have some way to know that he was God in the flesh. Jesus told his disciples, "Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you are not just my own. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves."